Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm
Hi.
calling in. It's Dawn. How are you?
Oh, hi, Dawn. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, folks.
Hi.
Hi.
Afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
It's a couple minutes to log in and I'll take attendance real quick. Thanks. All right, it looks like we do have quorum, so I'll go ahead and get the meeting started. It's 1:04 p.m. on Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's a meeting of the Environmental Advisory Council. I will go through and introduce council members, and then I'll ask members of the public to go ahead and introduce themselves. My name is Onauna Thone. I'm chair of the council. Also with me today is Robin Kay, Michael Tulang, Ron Terry, Roy Abe, Mary Bejer, Gordon Scretton, Rachel Sprague, Mahina Tutor, and Michelle Lefebvre. Oh, and Don Hager Nordblom by phone. All right. And you know what? Now that I just went through everybody, I got used to that. We members of the council, you do actually have to state whether or not you have anybody with you. So nobody is here with me. So I'll go back in order. Robin.
I'm by myself.
Thanks. Mike, what about you? You're on mute, Mike.
I'm by myself.
Thank you, Ron.
Solo.
Okay, Roy,
I'm by myself.
Mary,
By myself.
Gordon.
I do have other people around me.
I'm sorry?
I do have other people around me.
Okay. Rachel?
I'm by myself.
Okay. Mahina,
My 3-year-old is home with me, so she might pop in, but otherwise by myself.
Okay, thanks. Michelle?
By myself.
Okay, and Dawn?
By myself.
Okay. All right, also on the Zoom today, we have Mary Alice Evans, Director of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, and La Segundo from the Environmental Review Program. Our AG, Delaney Prescott-Tate, is here. And I will move now to our members of the public. We'll start with you, Scott, if you can just introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, my name is Scott Suga.
All right, and you're with?
Water.
Thank you. And Jason?
My name is Jason Kagemoto. I'm also with the Kauai Department of Water.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. All right, so first order of business, I'll hand it over to Mary Alice for the OP Director's update.
Okay, I don't have a report today, but I'll be available till about 2:30 to answer any questions that the members might have for me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mary Alice. In that case, I'll hand it over to you, Ron, for the Exemptions Committee update.
Thank you, Onauna. We held a brief exemptions committee meeting today, at which our sole order of business was considering whether to advise the council to allow the Kauai Department of Water to publish their list for 15-day comment. And we had these two gentlemen that you see came to our meeting, and we had a brief discussion, and we feel that they answered all the questions that we have. This list happens to be, I think this process started almost maybe 3 years ago, but at least 2 years ago we were, 2 years ago we were dealing with this. So they've been very responsive, and we feel that their list is up to par and ready for prime time. So our committee report constitutes a motion with a second. And are there any questions for myself or the members of the Kauai Department of Water that are here? Sounds like none. No objections. Onauna, then I would turn it over to you.
All right, so the motion before us again is to approve the Kauai Water Department's exemption list for publication in the environmental notice for a 15-day comment period. Because we have this motion out of committee, we can go ahead and vote. Any further discussion on this? Okay, well, thank you, Scott and Jason again, just for taking the time to do it and, doing a few rounds back and forth with us. So I will call the motion. All those in favor of approving the motion or approving the exemption list for publication in the notice, if you can raise your hand, or if you're on the call, say aye. I know.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, aye from Dawn. Michelle, do we have?
Aye for Michelle.
Okay. And Tessie?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. I believe it's unanimous, so we won't have to do a roll call. All right. Thank you, folks. So Ron will go ahead and follow up with you on the process that happens now that it'll be published in the next edition of the environmental notice.
All right, thank you, folks.
Thanks, Jason. Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Yep. So Tessie did just join us right before the vote at about 1:08 p.m. Hi, Tessie. All right. Okay. And Ron, I know there really aren't many other lists in the works right now, but if you want to just give a quick update on that.
Yeah, well, the one thing also we talked about at the meeting was that business is slow. No agencies have come in lately with lists. The folks we heard about maybe last year that were thinking about it, they haven't come back in. So in about October, I think we sent out a letter to all agencies with Les's help, and reminded them what they needed to do. And then we did it again about a year later. And I think it's time to do it again. And we're gonna, but I'm not sure, we've been dealing with the most responsive agencies up to this point. Now we got agencies that are out there that aren't doing much. I know I got the Hawaii Department of Water Supply tells me any day now they're going to do it, but I've been saying that for a year. So we got to get out there and remind them. And then, we may not, our exemptions committee may not be meeting so much over the next 6 months or so, but hopefully it'll pick up again. Oh, now, do you want to go into that pig thing, or do we just wait until next month?
I think you can mention it briefly just because we discussed it, at the meeting, but we can't take any action on it since it's not agendized. So
Okay,
I will agendize it for August.
Yeah, okay, we're thinking about requesting approval of a permitted interaction group to figure out a way to. I think we put the exemptions part of the rules together rather hastily. We had so many things to do when we were doing the rules, and I think it could be perhaps better written to incentivize agencies to update their lists in conformance with the new rules. And but there's some legal questions involved, so we want to get a pig together, including at least a couple, maybe 3 attorneys and some other folks, and try to come up with a recommended legislative and/or rule change to make the process work a little better. So that's all I'll say for now, but something will be on the agenda next month.
All right. Yep, we will get that agendized for next month. Thank you, Ron. Any questions for Ron on the exemptions committee update before we move on? Okay, go ahead, Robin.
This is a question about the potential pig. Does that mean I need to wait to ask this question until next month, or can I ask it now?
Might be better for next month, but we can try to answer it.
It just means I have to remember the question.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, we've talked about, some of you older guys know what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
We had talked earlier several times about, and in fact, it'll come up in the strategic planning thing, looking at revising a number of rules. So is this pig going to be just for the exemption committee issue, or will it have a broader focus? And I know we don't have to answer that now, but I just, maybe that's part of the discussion next month.
Yeah, well, I was envisioning it to be just for this one issue, because we're going to be looking beyond rules and into potential legislation and perhaps other avenues.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mary, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you then for the INO update.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We had a really nice INO meeting this morning, and I'm getting my notes out front of the pile here. Amazing how much I can pile on top of something in 1 hour. We convened our, Gordon, Dawn, Mahina, and I were all present with Les's support. Thank you very much. The main things that you need to know is that, as you can see from our agenda, we were looking at how do we go forward with our forums and what's the most constructive way to continue doing that. We're going to set aside the list of forums that we asked you to approve last year that we have not yet provided, and take the guidance of our legislative leaders, Representative Nicole Lowen and Senator Mike Gabbard. They'd like to see us do something in the vein of environmental impact statements and environmental assessments, EIS and EAs. We had a discussion as to whether or not who our audience should be for that. Maka'ala has been very vigilant in bringing forward to us how many of her community members frequently ask how to read them, how to understand them, where to access them from, that type of thing. And then in talking with Ron Terry to see if he would be willing to serve on a panel like that, he also pointed out that we have another audience besides the average consumer, and that would be our major customers, which are state agencies. And so in our INO meeting, we determined that those are two probably bookend groups of consumers, and that we're going to start with the consumer first, the little guy, if you'll excuse the expression. We felt that we learned from our lesson last year that we didn't want to take on too much. So we've set a deadline partially based on the first pass of panelists we'd like to have available for this meeting, this forum. And so our goal to have this event is prior to the end of 2022. It has to do with the people's availability. And then the conversation unfolded from there. We were using the guidance then of the report from the April 5th strategic planning meeting that we had a couple months ago. And that is linked in our agenda so that it makes it legit to talk about. We had all studied this report ahead of time and then discussed it in the meeting. And that we found that the guidance was there to do exactly what we were saying, to have the next forum to be on EAs and EISs. And then from there, we felt that the next one we thought would be really a good place for INO to be involved in would be on what's called the Green Report. Am I using the right term there, Ron? That was when we were working on
the green sheet.
Green sheet. Thank you, Les. I got it wrong still. The green sheet. When we were working on the rules, often we would say that something was, incomplete or couldn't be expounded upon as much in the rules as necessary. And so we talked about how we would have a green sheet for that area. So we can envision, and we see where rules is talking about, or not so much rules specifically, but that it's one of our priorities for next year is the unfinished rules business, which is kind of that green sheet stuff. And so INO is volunteering to the rules committee that we would be happy to put on a forum for you once you've finished that work, so that we can explain to everyone what a green sheet is and how they might find it, read it, or utilize it. And the next thing that more immediate thing that we've talked, so now we've moved down to the bottom of page 5 of that document and our priorities for next year. So our goal to support the rules finishing. Then the third bullet is craft an elevator speech. INO feels that that's probably very much within our job description. So each of us on the INO committee has the homework to write an elevator speech and bring it to the next meeting. If any of you would like to also provide an elevator speech of what is the EAC, we'd be happy to have your input. We plan to, put them up on the screen at our August meeting and hopefully come away from that with the perfect elevator speech for EAC. We reviewed all of the other priorities and found that they either were not appropriate for INO or we lacked information to do anything further with them until we moved over to page 6. And then we're just looking at other ideas of how to accomplish some of these bullets. How do we make a better forward face for EAC? How do we get the public to understand us better? And we could see where now that we've passed the baton to the environmental court, we won't be doing any more of the hearings than the environmental court will be. There might be a place under the bullet of using public access for getting information out, starting conversations regarding environmental justice and equity. And we threw around some names of people that we might interview or take an interviews type format for a forum and discuss some of the cases that have come before the environmental court. I think that there's a curiosity in our community of people, and that to hear more of them that they can get from just a soundbite on the news or a report in the newspaper. We expounded further on some of the work that's being done on various airlines to try to get environmental message out, and kind of we were a little bit 50-50 on whether that job is being done well or not. And so we're leaving that on our plan of work to talk about in future time frame. And then under part 4, there was the concept of supporting the establishment of a Department of the Environment. I just wanted to confirm that we did vote to bless that and just to lobby for it. Is that correct?
We've submitted testimony in support of it. I don't know if lobby is the correct term to use. but-
Advocate for it. Okay. All right. Just wanting to, we were unclear because since there's no money for EAC, it seemed odd that there would be money for a full-on department. And so we just wanted to acknowledge that. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Mary. Does anybody have any questions on INO's report? Okay, Gordon, go ahead.
I have one question. Since I have to make one, what is the elevator speech?
An elevator speech is if you walked into an elevator and you had 4 people standing there and they all wanted to know, what do? What do you say to them before you get to the next floor where the first person's going to get off?
So basically a 30-second soundbite of the message that you want to get across. That's probably as much time as you'll have in an elevator.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Gordon. We should have clarified that in the meeting, right?
All right, any other questions or comments? No, I think you folks had a really good meeting. Looking forward to seeing some of those, topics come to fruition as planned forums.
Oh, I forgot one thing. We don't have a budget. So if EAC doesn't have a budget, that means INO doesn't have a budget. But last year when we did the forums, I personally paid for the administrative help that we got for doing some of our flyers and things like that. And we just wanted to throw it out there that we might need to ask for some assistance in that regard.
All right, Mary Alice.
Mary, thank you. I did check with our accountant. There are funds that transferred over from the Department of Health. And in your base budget for FY23, and they were previously used for travel. And now that the council is not doing as much traveling as it was previously, some of those funds, if they aren't restricted by the Department of Budget and Finance, might be used for the kind of expenses that the various standing committees and permitted interaction standing committees, I think, and the council might want to use them for.
Thank you very much, Mary Alice. We're only talking about a few $100s, so
I think we can manage that.
Okay.
Yeah, and Marianne, in terms of the panels and the different events that you folks want to have, are we thinking they will be fully virtual at this point, given the budgetary constraints?
Yes, and we not only the budgetary constraints, but we think that we actually can deliver the product, the forum, to more people. Therefore, we hit that the equity within the community component. We don't have to worry so much about people being at work if we do them at lunchtime or right after work, in the early evening hour. It just depends on. We found that to have EAC support, we really need to do them during business hour time, which means lunch, to reach people. So I think we'll continue in that vein.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead, Mary Alice.
That reminded me, and we learned after the last meeting that the interim budget execution policy was issued, I think, toward the middle of June, and it said that the supplemental budget bill, which contains the funding to fill the Planner 5 position, which has been vacant due to lack of funding, is in the supplemental budget bill. Hasn't been signed and is on the intent to veto list. Our understanding is it really will be enacted, but probably right at the end of the governor's deadline for signing or enacting bills into law. And it will contain line item vetoes to bring the budget into balance so that the state doesn't need to pay back the federal government for funds that were appropriated by Congress to keep the Department of Education and the University of Hawaii operational during the pandemic. So we won't know until probably July 12th whether we have funding for that position for the ERP staff. So we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Here's hoping.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on the INO report? Okay, well, thanks very much, Mary. All right, Robin, thanks. I put on here a strategic planning forum. Oh, it should have been EAC Strategic Planning Committee. Excuse me, update. I don't know if you have anything yet.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a real good meeting. The committee is now Ron Terry, Rachel, Gordon, Roy, myself, and Makaala. And everyone was there except Makaala. She was unable to join us. So we had a quorum. We had a really good discussion. We focused on, and thank you, Mary, for referring to it. It's good to see us all connected here. We focused on the 14 priorities that were listed as what should be our next 12 months priorities. And so we went through those and had a chance to discuss the ones that brought some consensus to us. And so we came up with 4. And the first one was, well, first of all, there was a comment that all of them should be preserved as important to us, even though we're only going to do some of them. We don't have the resources or the time as an all volunteer group to do all of them. So the ones we agreed to focus on and bring back to you was the first one, unfinished rules business, addressing supplemental EAs, records of decision, clarifying definitions, and so forth. And as you heard, some of this is already being addressed by the Rules Committee and by INO. So we think we're on the right track for that. The second one was to find our place with OPSD and to begin to, well, not begin, but to enrich the conversations we've had with Mary Ellis about ways in which we can work together, not just in terms of what resources can they provide to us, but what role can we play to help them in their mission, if you will. It's not our intent to have a one-sided conversation. We think we can bring to the table some resources that you might find useful, Mary Alice, and your colleagues as well. So we didn't go into more detail on that. I think clearly Onana and you have been having conversations about a number of things. I don't know that we want to formalize that anymore and have kind of a working team, or whether we just do it issue by issue, but it's something for all of us to think about. How do we make sure that we're all working together and being helpful to each other, so that we don't kind of mimic somewhat of the abyss that existed with our previous landlord. The third priority was, again, Mary was so eloquent about talking with that, and that is to craft the elevator speech and then promote broader public understanding of the EAC. We talked a lot about process and how we needed to strengthen our internal processes, thus the first 3 priorities, before going on to being more engaged in actual specific environmental issues. Which brings us to the 4th priority, which was to deal with the carrying capacity issue. We had a good conversation about the hiatus that occurred, fortunately and unfortunately both, because of COVID. And yet we all had a little bit of a chuckle at how enthusiastic some people are that we're now getting back to those crazy numbers. And so we talked a little bit about what role could the EAC play in that. And one of the things we kind of came up with was that there's probably a good role for us as a convener of a conversation. It gives us a little bit of statewide visibility. It helps us address some of the other priorities, but it also tackles a specific environmental issue. What is happening to our environment as a result of this incredible number of visitors that are coming in here? And so we envisioned addressing that priority in the role of convener rather than doing the research that is going to be a big part of that. So those were the 4 priorities that we felt as a group would be where we should focus for the next 12 months. And good to hear the previous reports, because a lot of it's already being addressed. Anybody on the committee, did I miss anything, or do you want to add anything? Ron, Rachel, Gordon, Roy? Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments? I think the key. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, after the meeting, we talked about carrying capacity, and I had this book by Governor Ariyoshi. It's called Hawaii's Future, and it's a 2020 book, and what's interesting, he has a whole chapter on managed growth and capacity analysis, and apparently, yeah, during his term, he did try to address it, and there are a lot of challenges. Obviously, everybody has different perspectives, but there were a lot of movement in that, in the 70s, 80s, and beyond. And so I thought it was kind of interesting. So if anybody has a chance to read, it's like a $20 book, but it has a nice chapter. And I think there were a lot of studies. I'm not sure, Mary Alice, if the planning office has a lot of the past studies, but I was saying, it'll give us kind of a overview of what they did in the past. And, we don't want to recreate the wheel, and we should understand what challenges they had. Ariyoshi did try to limit capacity, and he struggled, and he did note that the population for residents hasn't increased, in the past 5-6 years much, but the tourism folks, tourism population has increased a lot. So yeah, tourism is the key component. So anyway, just some comments. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. I think our goal is, as a committee, is to help any way possible with some of those priorities, and to keep in mind the issue of that number 4, that carrying capacity. For us to play a significant role statewide as a vocal leader, we thought it was important to do the first 3 successfully. So while we're talking about 12 months, some of these may take longer than that, but we don't want to lose sight of them. So that's my report, and I'm standing by it.
Thank you, Robin. All right, anybody else, questions or comments? Okay, Mahina, I'll go ahead.
I'm sorry, one more thing. I want to thank Les. I sent Les a very late email asking him for some technical help on our meeting that he tried very hard to get in place. It turns out to be too difficult because of the way the system is set up. But I just want to publicly thank Les for going that extra mile and trying. I mean, I wrote to him on Sunday of July 4th weekend, and he actually got it almost done. So thanks, Les.
Oh, you're welcome, Robin. Thank you.
Thanks, Les. Okay, Mahina, if you can go ahead with the rules update.
Thanks, Sonona. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is first talk about what we discussed today, what our plan is moving forward, and then quickly open it up for kind of a general discussion of potential policies and procedures and timing. So first, we met today. Early this morning, as you might recall, we voted as a council to repeal our procedural rules and instead establish policies and procedures. Delaney was able to join us in our meeting and explain the process moving forward. So in a nutshell, what we're going to need to do to repeal our procedural rules is first draft this 1-pager. And please jump in at any time if I'm missing anything. We have to determine if the SBA is affected, if anything affects small businesses, if our repeal and enacting of bylaws would have any effect on small businesses. We then create a memorandum to the governor from the director of the department to request the rule repeal. We have to, give our justification, identify what the final result will be, obtain approval from the gov to get a public hearing, then publish notice about the hearing, hold a public hearing, prepare another memo to the governor after the hearing and address any comments, of course, that we get from the public, then send another memo to the governor asking for approval of our repeal of the rules. Then I think the lieutenant governor file stamps it and sends it back. So that's kind of it really quickly. Our plan right now as the rules committee is, well, after that part is done, is to move forward with our policies and procedures that kind of better reflect what we can now do as a council. So Dawn and I, with Ron's help, are going to get started on this memo to the governor, giving our reasoning for repealing the rules. We're then hoping that each of the standing committees can, take a crack at formulating what their policies and procedures are as a committee. And we kind of discussed, I think INO might already have something like this. Ron is going to do it for the exemption committee. Yeah, that's kind of it really quickly. Onauna is going to take on kind of hybrid meetings, travel procedures for in-person meetings, and things like appearing before the council. So that's our plan in the short term. We have some things to table in the long term. We'd like to eventually do some guidance for the 343 rules. Oh, and one thing I forgot is we're also going to, of course, figure out what we can use from our old procedural rules to put into these policies and procedures. We have that as a starting point. So with that, our hopeful timeline is that we're asking if everyone can work on their sections. We talked about what a realistic timeline for this might be. We're hoping that by the August agenda deadline, it would be possible for everyone to send their sections to Les so that we can then put it together, put on the rules agenda for our August meeting so that we can compile and kind of make everything cohesive and maybe have that ready for our September meeting. But if anybody has any thoughts about that or any questions, please speak up. Or if anybody has any questions, I know Dawn, you had a question for Mary Alice too. If you want to present that now.
Yeah, I just had a question for Mary Alice is, rule repeal or amendment or changing language is not easy. So would you be able to assign a staff member from, besides Les, that would help us, that has been familiar with the rule change for Office of Planning and Sustainability, so we can kind of do a little team effort?
Dawn, we don't have rules that I'm aware of. So we don't have a staff member who's familiar with that. When I think back to when I was deputy for the department, we did have Dori Palkovich, who is the executive officer for the Small Business Regulatory Review Council board, actually. And she's probably the one in DBED who's most familiar with the rules process. I can ask and see if she has some capacity to assist the council. Would that be something you'd like me to explore?
Yeah, I think any and all help would be great. I'm sure we'll pitch in our best as well on the committee, but I think maybe there are all the little technical details and also logistics that we might, I don't know, maybe there's a checklist that she has that we could kind of look at, make sure we're doing the right process. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, let me correct. We do have rules. They're for CZM, Chapter 205A, and they have to do with, as you know, banning shoreline hardening and various other CZM issues that are then passed along to the counties to implement. And so Dr. Shichao Lee in our office did work on that, but he's pretty jammed. So I don't know if he has the capacity to assist, and he's only done it once, whereas Dori deals with, rule changes from all the departments as they flow through the Small Business Regulatory Review Board's process. But I can check out both of those.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Robin.
Mahina, I'm a little fuzzier than usual. Can you restate what you, for example, I'm chair of the legislative committee. What would you want from me by August's meeting?
That's a good question, Robin. And I mean, we didn't really discuss the legislative committee specifically in our meeting either, but I guess just generally how your committee handles its business, if you have any processes that you think should stay in place when you're no longer on the council or on that committee. That's kind of how I see it.
Is there any place that those current rules or procedures or policies exist in writing about the committee, for example, legislative? I guess I'm trying to say, I don't see much difference between that committee and another committee. You know,
It's kind of like a to-do list, Robin. You know, what I had in mind for Ledge Committee is something, I think early on, right? You're very good, you know, in November, December of setting a meeting with Senator Gabbard and Rep. Lowen for January, right? So kind of keeping just those kind of things, like make sure to set meeting with, you know, relevant legislators so you can get on their schedules before session starts. And then also at the earliest meeting of the year, maybe note that we should appoint and have an action item on the EC agenda to allow testimony by the chair and the chair of the, you know, those kind of things, right? Because I think there have been years where we've forgotten to do that and then we're behind schedule with getting that action item of allowing testimony or identifying bills. So I think those kind of logistics for legislative committee.
and it's my committee that's being talked about. Hang on. I'm sorry, somebody was.
No, no. But just those kind of checklist things, right? Of this is what Ledge Committee should be doing on a regular basis, or, you know, at this point in the year, this is when Ledge Committee kind of gets activated and these are the things you should be doing.
Okay, so you're not asking me for actual legal jargon. It's really
No,
just.
this is not legal rule. You know, again, we're moving to policies and procedures, right? So it can be like for INO, it'll probably be a little bit more checklisty when you talk about these are the things you need to do on the day of a forum, right? And maybe for other sections, it'll be more narrative and explaining. But, you know, and for Ledge, I think it will be kind of a calendar checklist based because you need to do certain things at certain times in the year. So it will be different based on committee. We're just trying to, I think, centralize the information. And because some of these things are rules of policies and procedures in the past, if you folks recall, they were really aimed at, you know, dealing with the appeals, declaratory rulings, kind of the more legal processes of the council, where that's really not what we do on a normal basis, right? We're always like, oh, what did we do last year? Okay, even for our annual report, right? We'll have a section that wants annual report committee to start working on, especially now that our annual report has changed. You know, at what point in the year do you need to start doing X, Y, and Z? You know, when do you start reaching out to folks? When do we need to get something to the director to meet, you know, the January deadline, that type of a thing. So that's kind of more in line of what we're looking for. It could be bullet pointed to start, but, you know, I think it kind of, we're writing an instruction manual almost is maybe how I envision it. Yeah.
That makes much more sense. I was concerned it needed to be a lot more my wife's language, not mine. And then for the strategic planning committee, since we're so new, we really don't have any procedures per se. So do you need something do we need to think about that committee too, or?
I would think about it, but if there's nothing relevant that would go here at this time, then, you know, no need. And again, this policies and procedures document, we can amend, you know, by vote of the council. It can be a living document. But let's just kind of get something started for the things that we know we do on a regular basis and want to start addressing, since we won't have rules of practice and procedure in place.
And Mahina, you want this in time for the next meeting? Is that right? Which means 6 or 7 days before the next meeting, which is 3 weeks from now. Is that right?
If possible. I mean, part of this discussion that we're having now is this a realistic deadline? And if it's not, then that's up for discussion. If, you know, folks think they'll need more time to draft that up, then we can say ahead of the September meeting agenda, because so that the plan is for those drafts to go to the rules committee at whatever agenda we get it from the other folks working on sections. And the
seems to
rules
me-
committee would, I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, from the description that Mahina gave, you, Onana, seem to have the heaviest burden of all. And you're also one of the busiest of us.
Mhm.
So I would suggest you exercise your chair prerogative. And is this deadline going to be reasonable for you?
Who knows? I mean, whether it's going to be busy no matter what. So if we need to get things done, we need to get things done. But
Great.
I'm also interested in hearing from the other committees because I'm not doing all of it. I'm being very clear about this needs to be done amongst all of us. I can't do it all. So that's why we're asking folks to take their different sections, right? And if they can draft it, and then we'll have to compile it. And so basically what the rules committee is setting for itself is, a month after we get it from, or the month following when we get it from everybody else, we'll try to compile it into one document and conform it, to the extent we can. I mean, this may take longer, but in terms of getting drafts out to the rest of the council and putting all the other sections together, right? We want to get started on it. And I don't want to push it out too far because, of course, everybody gets busy and other things might come up. So we should just get some things down on paper and start working on this.
Chair,
Go ahead, Mary Alice.
in terms of what you might want to put in policies and procedures for the legislative process, each administration changes its legislative schedule a little bit and its review process. So putting that in policies and procedures for those bills that you're going to, as a council, recommend to be put in the governor's bill package, which of course, does get automatically introduced. And so is one way, as you guys know, there's other ways to get, say, statutory changes made. And so we're on an annual schedule too. It flows downhill. The governor, this governor has been convening a legislative coordinators meeting for all the departments and the larger attached agencies on a monthly basis during session, and a little less frequently, but as soon as, starting with, say, September or August, again on monthly basis. Though that information comes back to the department. Jill Sugihara is our department ledge coordinator. She sends that out to all of the DBED programs. And I can send that to the ERP staff. They can then provide it to you, and that gives you a roadmap or a timeline for getting bill drafts into the executive branch. You have more flexibility if you want to work directly with legislators, and certainly more, more time. But the advantage of getting a bill draft into the governor's bill package is it has already been vetted by the Office of the Attorney General, and therefore you're less likely to have one of those wonderful testimonies that say the Department of the Attorney General has concerns about the bill language, which tends to catch the legislators' attention sometimes. Anyway, so I don't know that you want to put anything very definitive into your policies and procedures on a legislative process, as long as it leaves room for the executive branch or governor's bill schedule, because that could change. We'll have a new governor next year. They may do it differently. Probably likely to follow the same calendar, simply because it makes sense in terms of how long it takes for the various entities to review and comment on bill drafts within the executive branch before it gets introduced on the Monday after the opening of the session in January at 4:30. That's when the governor's bill package goes down to the clerk's office for bill number assignment and introduction. But anyway, that's my suggestion.
No, that's a good option. And I don't think we've utilized that process before. So Robin, I was just going to say, I was like, that might be a way to go in the future because I wasn't aware that we were able to take advantage of that process in particular.
Well, neither was I. And by going, I mean, there was in hindsight, it was wonderful sort of that we went to Rep. Lowen and Senator Gabbard because they wrote the bill, but they wrote more than we asked for, as we all remember. And so we've never gone the route you're talking about. What I'd like to do with legislative, since it's a little bit quirky, is I'll draft this up as a checklist, but I'd like to run it by Onana and Mary Alice before I submit it to Mahina. Is that all right?
It's fine with me.
We can take a look at it. And again, there's room for editing even once we put it together, folks. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to be, given what Mary Alice just said, I'm going to make it kind of general in terms of the governor's part.
Yeah, and again, this is a guidance document for this council and future councils to kind of just have some procedures in mind. And, of course, there may be a council in the future, or even for us, who we don't want to do any legislation we don't have to do it, right? It's just, if you're going to do it, these are kind of your timelines that you need to hit and the things you need to do and whatnot. So, before we go into further substantive discussion on this, I do want to just clarify and make it really clear so that I think the drafting of the policies and procedures is working in tandem with us working to repeal the existing HR 11-201. So what Don and Mahina are working on over this next month are, Mary Alice, our thought was to start drafting what your memo to the governor would be. I mean, of course, you're going to review and change it, but we wanted to just provide, again, the justification for why we're asking it. And hopefully it's a lot easier. And we understand this memo goes from you to the governor. So hopefully that's helpful to you. And if not, let us know and we're happy to change up that process. But I think that's the biggest deliverable right now.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of getting the repeal process started. So we'll go from there. And I think Mahina, we also talked about at the rules meeting, for the repeal, our feeling was that we probably don't need hearings on every island to repeal the procedural rules. But of course, we leave that open to others, other discussion. And we're wondering if we're going to be able to do a hearing on the repeal, if it can be all virtual or if it's going to be hybrid. I mean,
I think we're still hybrid, aren't we?
Yeah, by law. Okay. Go ahead, Don.
I think there's also a question about Mary Alice. I don't think we, the council, can do a hearing officer, can be the hearing officer. So we might need a staff person from your office to be the hearings officer. Is that right? We're going to do this.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, normally you do have somebody serve as a hearings officer for repeals because the whole council doesn't want to hear all of it. Sometimes nobody shows up at our hearings when nothing's exciting going on. Yeah, we can, either Les or Tom can serve as the hearings officer for this required public hearing.
Okay, great. So I think we'll work out those logistics when it gets a little bit closer to getting to hearing. Okay. So yeah, going back to the substantive discussion on the sections, Mahina gave a good overview. So we kind of based this off the topics that were mentioned in the last meeting. So, Ron will work on drafting up the process for exemptions because we do have a process whereby the exemptions chair works with the agencies before it actually comes to council. For INL, if you folks can write up, I know you folks have already your checklist for what you do on a forum day, for flyers and whatnot, but to the extent there's anything else that you want to include in there, or for I know you're going through strategic planning and whatnot, considerations as well that can be added in. For annual report, Steph's the chair, so I'll try reaching out to her, but I can try to draft something as well. But the other members right now, Roy and Tessie, if you folks have ideas on what we need to do for our annual report. Last year, what we did was we kind of just gave a summary of what had happened within the last year with the move over to OP, talking about some of the changes, and then that got dropped into OPSD's report. So it shouldn't be too extensive, but any thoughts, just go ahead and send it to me so that we can start drafting that. For the regular kind of regular procedural stuff, I'll work on that. Meeting procedures, drafting of agendas, that kind of things. How do you get stuff on the agenda? And Mahina is going to be helping work on the rules portion as well, right? Okay. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that we forgot as of right now? And again, this is our first start. We can work on this and somebody might say, oh, we forgot to add this in, we can always add that in later. So that's basically where we are for now.
Are we going to have to include a section for a future rules update? In other words, documenting or checklist all the things that Scott and we did for that major revision. Is that going to be part of this too?
I mean, if we can get that in it, that'd be great, because we're going to be doing, or this council has been talking about doing a rules update, right?
Yeah. Does that checklist exist? Before Scott left, or now, did you have the procedures as an outline of how we went about it? I mean, it was obviously a massive exercise.
No, I don't have it. Les, I wonder if that's something you folks have in your records.
No,
Yeah.
we don't.
It's really a Scott-driven effort, right?
Oh, we should just ask him to write it.
I think he's busy enough. He's running a department. But we'll try, again, it's really role-based, right? And we got to think the last process was above and beyond. So there's what's required by law. We can try to fill in. I think most, some of us remember what was done here and there. But again, even that process is going to be, whatever we draft will be flexible, right? Because we talked about this last time, depending on the level of the rule change, again, your process might not be the same, right? If it's a full overhaul like we did last time, we really focus on getting a lot of process. If we're making a tweak here and there, we don't want to hold anybody accountable for not, doing level 100 when it's like a level 1 rule change. But yeah, it's a good point. We'll try to come up with kind of the basic process. I think a lot of us came in, at the end of some of us came in at the end of that process. It had started years before us too. So there will definitely be some blanks in terms of what really happened on the front end. Any comments on that? Am I missing anything? Okay. Okay, Mahina, I'll turn it back over to you for the rest of your update.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I think with those clarifications, I guess, first of all, Mary Alice, is there anything that you need from us? That was one thing we just thought about during the Rules Committee meeting. Is there anything you need for us moving forward for this? Besides our drafts, of course, and all that.
No, I don't think so. This is, you're doing, I guess, two things. One is complying with the new law, and then figuring out if you want to add stuff in addition to that. So I think the ball's in your court on that one.
Great. The second thing is, before we move on, does this timeline sound doable for everyone as of now, or does anybody want to propose something a little different? We're good? We'll try it. Okay, awesome. Okay, and with that, I think the last meeting, we kind of asked everyone to kind of think of what our policies and procedures could potentially include, besides the topics we already discussed. So if we just want to open it up for any ideas on that, anything that came to mind. And I know Onauna had a list that had come up from at the last meeting.
Excuse me, I don't know if anybody else is having this trouble. It's very broken up for me. The audio is that just me? Okay. I didn't really understand what you were asking.
Sorry, Ron. I was just asking if anybody had feedback on potential topics that we want to include in our policies and procedures.
Yeah, so I went through that list a little bit earlier. I don't know if there's any, I mean, I think those are kind of the big items for now. But if there's anything else, we go ahead and bring it up right now. We can start working on that.
One of the things that gives all of us challenge, I know Mary has talked about it, and so have many of us, are the requirements of sunshine. The challenge, the deadlines, for example, and the communication restrictions. Those challenges have a significant impact on our procedures and our policies. Today, I wanted to send an email to the 6 members of my committee, and I agonized over whether I'd get the council in trouble by doing it and wound up having to ask Les to do it. So a big part of our procedures are really every state agency's or whoever is subject to sunshine. And so I'm not sure we need to restate that, Onana, or do we just kind of reference and say all of this is subject to the rules of sunshine which apply to EAC? It was really challenging, we all agree, to communicate because we have to do it the right way and not go to jail.
I mean, yeah, we can reference that, but I mean, that should be under everybody's mind at all times, right? That we are Chapter 92. We're a Sunshine Board, so we're bound by that.
Chair?
Go ahead, Marianne.
Because your structure includes standing committees, and in addition to permitted interaction groups, those standing committees have to follow all of the rules of Chapter 92 for Sunshine, where permitted interaction groups have some flexibility, although they're not good for speedy recommendations because you have the 3 meeting rule. They aren't subject to the deadlines for filing agendas. So as you think about whether flexibility is important for certain tasks versus some continuity of roles. You may decide you want to do more things with permitted interaction groups and fewer with standing committees, or the opposite. It's going to be, but it does, Robin, it does, the choice of using a permitted interaction group versus a standing committee does relate directly to the rigidity of Sunshine.
are good points. Thanks, Mary Alice. Okay, it sounds like we're kind of wrapping up the discussion on what policies and procedures there should be. Mahina, if you're okay for the second bullet point, if we can defer that just for a moment, because I know Mary Alice needs to leave at 2:30. I do want to, potentially skip ahead to item number 8. So discussion of, future meetings, and in this morning's Rules Committee meeting, and I know at the last full council meeting we had last month, we talked about having an in-person meeting with everybody, maybe around the fall. And I think we're initially thinking September. That may be difficult for some folks. So I wanted to check with this group. Is maybe October okay for, the full council to meet in person, and check with Mary Alice if that's okay with OPSD.
Oh, it's definitely okay with us.
Okay, thanks. All right. How's everybody else? So I think Mahina, you said you weren't going to be able to make September, right? But October should be okay. Okay. How's everybody else's schedule? We haven't met in over, 2 years, right? So it'd be nice to have. I think this October meeting would probably be our one in-person meeting this calendar year. And then we can discuss in the future, how we're going to do. I think we talked about perhaps maybe twice a year, maybe once a quarter, but we'll see how this one goes. Everybody else okay for October?
So the date be the same? We have down October 4th as the first Tuesday.
Right, first Tuesday of the month, yeah.
That's fine. I'm fine.
Okay. Not really hearing objections from anybody, so hoping Maka'ala and Steph will be able to join as well.
And Mary Alice, we have enough travel money, so you can bring us all in. Got a lot of neighbor island people here.
Mhm.
Hopefully by October, you won't have expended all your your other current expense funding on other things. But if you, I think you will want to make those airfare charges, early. You can make them in the first quarter for meeting in the second quarter. First quarter is July 1st to September 30th. And so you'd want to do that anyway. I don't see any concern. There will be a restriction on all of our general funds. That was part of the governor's interim policy on budget execution. So whatever the current line item is will be reduced by probably 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And given that we haven't done this in such a long time, the procedure is, if I remember correctly, you folks make the reservations for us.
Our staff has to do that. We have a travel contract that is competitively procured with by the State Procurement Office for the entire executive branch. And I think Hawaiian Airlines is our vendor now. If there is no Hawaiian Airlines service to Lanai, then of course it's whoever can fly to Lanai, unless you're thinking of taking a sailboat.
No, there's Mokulele flies here.
Yeah.
That's the only airline that flies.
Oh,
to.
no worries. Whoever provides service to whatever island people are coming in for, that will, that'll work.
Okay.
I will say, Les probably will share this later, but I will say that there's a preference for taxi or Lyft over rental cars, simply because the price of rental cars has gone up so dramatically since the pandemic. It used to be like, $25, $30 a day. It's now sometimes around 100, and taxis and Lyft are lower. Now I know some people prefer to have a rental car for flexibility, but I think we have that preference for taxis or Lyft or getting a ride from the airport. So there's that. And I think a preference for, as Jen put in the memo that she sent out to all of you on travel policies, if it's a single meeting and it's going to be a same day event, if you wish to change your reservations to add on a day, all of those additional expenses will be at your cost. We can't pay for more than that, more than the single day costs.
That makes sense. Thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, I travel a lot, so if Jen makes the original reservation for me, like, for example, for me to come in on a Tuesday morning and go home on a Wednesday morning, that's not going to cost any different if I go home on Tuesday night. It may actually cost less.
Okay, it may, I'm sure you're right. The challenge will be that for us, it'll be a what we call, in this, please don't be offended by it, a personal deviation. So if you, because it's a single meeting on a single day, and if it were something that we got, if it were authorized travel for overnight, we'd end up having to pay lodging and a per diem. So we don't do that. So if you want to come and stay overnight, the authorized travel will be for the single day. Your personal deviation at your expense will be for the add-ons.
I want to go on record. I'd like it to be written down that is extremely short-sighted. It is poor volunteer management and insulting.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I second that. The way we did it in last or previous years for me was I would come, exactly like Mary said, I would come in on a Tuesday morning, go to the meeting and stay over at my own expense. Of course, I wasn't asking anybody to pay for the hotel, but the reservations were made for the following day so that I could do my doctor visit or whatever. And it was the same price. So otherwise you're forced, not you, Mary Alice, but this policy is forcing us to be personally deviant and to
terrible word.
Yeah, really. To make a change, and we'd have to change the reservation, which then there's a fee. It's going to cost more money rather than just us making a round trip that comes back the next morning.
I think you've misunderstood me.
Probably.
The authorized travel will be for the single day. If you request that Jen makes the reservation for the following day, then if that's your personal travel. And so if there's an additional cost, then you pay it. If there's no additional cost, there's there's no fee for it. So I think maybe, Mary, you may have misunderstood what I was saying, and I apologize if I wasn't clear. It's just we have on the travel approval form, there will be two calculations. One's the authorized travel, which is based on the state. It's not DBED, it's not OPSD, it's the state procurement office's travel policy that we all follow. And then there will be whatever the personal travel deviation from that policy is. And if it engenders additional fee, you'll be responsible for it. If it doesn't, then there's no difference.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, thank you, Mary Alice.
Okay, Don, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Just a really quick question. So I have two types of travel. One is Hawaiian and one is Mokulele. And I personally prefer Mokulele because I don't have to go through the TSA line and go through the airport and the main terminal. So I'm wondering, do I have that ability to choose? And if Mokulele is cheaper, would that be acceptable for travel?
Yes, but it would be deemed a personal deviation from the state procurement office's travel policy. So, if it's cheaper, that's great.
We'll try. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions for Mary Alice on this?
One more. That's the schedule for this. If we're looking at October 4th, when do we need to start this process with Jen?
Anytime you like.
Okay.
Have we decided when we're meeting in person?
So we'll keep this, yeah, so October 4th, it's looking like, and hopefully, you know, that works for Stefan Makala as well. October 4th, we'll keep the same meeting schedule, committee meetings in the morning. And then our meeting in the afternoon. Les, will we be using the room that you're in now or the upstairs 15th floor?
I'm not sure. Would this, Mary Alice, would this be a hybrid meeting or this is an in-person meeting?
So, yeah, that was my next question. If we need to do it hybrid, I was thinking all in person.
I think you have the option of all in person because it establishes a physical location that the public can attend the meeting.
Yeah, yeah, I can, let me talk to Jen. We might be able to schedule it on the 15th floor like we had.
Yeah, I guess the one wrinkle, and I will put this to Ron, is if you expect we have exemptions committee folks that need, or exemption agency folks who need to come to the meeting.
Yeah,
then
I don't at this point, but I do think that people have gotten used to being able to attend our meetings. Even though not that many people take advantage of it. I can just hear Makaala steam coming out her ears if we exclude Uncle from the meeting because now we're only holding it in person. Is it a terrible imposition to hold a hybrid meeting?
It takes a lot of different technology. The reason Les had established the in-person location in room 405 of our building is because the Land Use Commission has the technology to manage both in-person and hybrid.
I see.
And not every meeting room, especially, I don't know what the 15th floor has, and I don't even know if DHERD makes the 14th floor available now, but it's requires additional technology to do it both.
Yeah, I'm a little puzzled about that because I mean, I'm in a lot of groups, volunteer groups and that sort of thing. And, each one of our chairs seems to have that technology in their phone to be able to allow people onto a Zoom meeting. So, what's the deal? Why is it hard for the state to host a Zoom meeting?
It is not hard for the state to host a Zoom meeting, Ron. We've been doing it ever since the start of the pandemic. When the legislature, or actually I guess it was whenever the governor's emergency order expired and the legislature had changed the law to require one physical location if the meeting was being held by video conferencing, we realized that our conference rooms didn't have, so it's not a matter of putting it on a phone. The individual attending by Zoom can use a phone or a laptop or an iPad or a desktop without any trouble at all. It's the physical site that needs the technology in order to have the Zoom meeting up on a big monitor on one wall of the conference room so that the in-person people can see everybody that is attending by video conferencing. And some of our meeting rooms have that, and others. I went to one where it was my first in-person meeting, and I was chairing. I walked in, and she said, "Well, what happened? You didn't bring your laptop." And I said, "Why do I need a laptop?" And the tech person said, "Well, because we can't get everybody up on the monitor screen because it's not set up for that. So the only way you can attend this meeting is with a laptop." So I didn't want to turn around and go back to my office. So I borrowed a laptop and we did the whole thing with physical presence, but all of us on our laptops sitting around a conference table. So that's an example of why, and we're getting up to speed, depending on which departments have funding for the additional equipment. I think you'll find that we will have that ability probably within a year, but it's expensive. And so the departments that have funding will be there first, and the programs that don't have that funding will take a little longer.
Yeah, and thank you, Mary Alice, for that explanation. I mean, those are all really good points. And I've been to a couple of hybrid meetings as well. And this is why I suggested maybe we do it all in person. And in that case, and these are actually land use commission meetings again, so they did have the technology, but for all of the parties, we did bring our laptops. So you're speaking into it, but what they had to do was connect a microphone system that hooks into the Zoom so the audio is good. So you're not using your computer audio, but now you have microphones set up for everybody in the room that needs to be of good enough quality that the folks on the Zoom can hear it. So I don't know that we'll have, well, we probably won't have that microphone system is my guess as a council to set up. So a virtual meeting could be a little difficult, or if we did a hybrid, even though that's technically what we're doing now. And Les, I haven't been in that room with you yet, so I don't know what it looks like. Do you have a projector screen set up for the audio and a speaker, or how are you hearing us? Okay.
Yeah, we do, but the thing is, I don't know if we'll be able to accommodate comfortably all 15 people in here, plus the public, yeah, because the Land Use Commission meets in here, but as you can see behind me, I have
Oh, we can't see behind you. I don't know where you are in the room.
oh, I'm ERP.
No, yeah, I see that. I see the room, but I just don't see you.
No, because I'm at the computer, that's why, and the screen, the camera is pointing to the area where the public will be sitting, yeah? And so if you have right now we have enough room for the council, but I don't know if we'll have enough room for the participants that want to attend the meeting in person, yeah, right now. So I don't know what the capacity is right now for this room. I would say probably no more than 20.
Okay, one other question is your audio, are you speaking just directly into the computer?
I'm speaking directly into the computer, which runs into the rally system here that the Land Use Commission has set up, yeah.
Yeah, so your audio coming from that room is pretty good. Can you do me a favor, maybe walk to the other side?
Okay, sure.
And what I'm trying to find out is if we were to just use that without, additional speakers, will you be able to hear everyone?
Can you see me?
Yeah, and we can hear you. Okay.
You can hear me?
Yeah, it's pretty clear actually. Might work.
Yeah, because they have a omnidirectional microphone on the front table.
Okay, so I guess maybe I would say, and others can join in, if we can use that room with your setup now, that might work for a hybrid meeting. But if we're in a different room with not as good of an audio system.
Yeah, I would think we could. That's I guess if you all feel comfortable, crowding into the room here. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else thoughts? I mean, we'll have time before October to decide if it's going to be fully in person or hybrid.
Yeah, I would be okay with it.
With the hybrid, yeah.
Yeah, but if we can't, we can't. Thank you, Mary Alice, for your explanation. And Les.
Yeah. There's also the camera here can zoom in on whoever's speaking, so.
Okay, thanks, Les. Don?
Do you want me to ask any other agencies if they have any bigger rooms?
I think it's not just the room, it's a room with the requisite technology, right? Yeah. I think there's certainly bigger rooms. I'm not sure who else has the technology to do the hybrid meetings.
When I work for National Guard, but that's in couple A, so I don't know, you guys have to all go to couple A, but they have They have, look at y'all saying no already. They have a huge room with that capability, but then I'm sure I could probably get them to lend us a room, but that's in Kapolei, you know. And I was also thinking of the DLNR boardroom.
The room's a lot smaller too, though.
Yeah, it is really small.
Yeah.
Also,
They're
Chair
different departments. Sorry,
Chair
go ahead.
said that that's the room that had a problem. We all had to be on our laptops. Chair Case said she just signed the requisition order for the new technology, but it may not be delivered and installed due to supply disruptions by the time of your October meeting.
Yeah, I think I mean, that room looks like it could hold us. And of course, folks are welcome to wear masks, you know, while we're all in there. Hopefully that wouldn't mess up the audio too much, but the audio generally sounds fine with you, Les. I think maybe we can, if we can try to spread out a little bit in that room.
Yeah, I can ask the LUC how they can alter, you know, configure this, yeah, to get more people in.
The tables all have wheels. They can.
Yeah.
The Land Use Commission generally meets only on Wednesdays and Thursdays, so a Tuesday meeting shouldn't conflict with their normal monthly hearing schedule, or actually every 2 weeks for that matter. They meet a lot.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, again, we have a couple of meetings in between that, so we can continue this discussion on logistics for that room. But yeah, I guess for now, then let's plan for a hybrid meeting, but with all of the council members present in person on October 4th.
On October 4th. Okay, I'll let Jen know.
Okay. Thanks, Les.
No,
Any other questions? I know Mariella has to go. Oh, okay.
A quick question. For those of us coming in, do I remember that some of the committee meetings will be at 8?
Well, we have a placeholder for annual report committee and strategic planning at 8. If we're coming in person, we can modify the schedule, assuming everybody's okay with in-person meeting only for the committee meetings, right? Because the reason we had to stagger the schedule is because we had to do, Les can only have one Zoom running at a time. Now, if we're doing in-person meetings, what we did previously was we had concurrent committee meetings, so we could push them back later, but that assuming that there aren't overlapping members on different committees for those meetings running at the same time. So there's a little coordination I need to do, but that's for further discussion, right? So if you don't want to, I mean, I know at 8 o'clock meeting's hard for Neighbor Island folks coming in.
Just means an overnight.
Right.
For Lanai, there's no way you can make it. It just doesn't happen.
So I think,
sorry, Mary Alice.
When we get closer to that October meeting, we need to know which committees actually need to meet. If folks are going to meet in person, I mean, we may not have, I mean, actually, we probably should do an annual report meeting soon just to get the content down or by October. But we can overlap those with other meetings happening if we do committee meetings online or in person only. That's the only way we can hold concurrent meetings. And then less, maybe we can hold, you know, use the ERP room, right? As we did in the past for committee meetings. Yeah, have some people in this room, have some people in the ERP room.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and I know that's one of your committees, Robin, that we have at 8 a.m., but we can push
If you
that
keep
back.
it at that, that's great. Then I'll just have to come in the night before.
Right. Well, I would say we'll try to stock the meetings closer to, you know, later in the day. 8 o'clock's a tough time, you know, get any meeting started. But yeah, folks, you know, full EAC meeting, we can definitely aim for the hybrid. But if folks are okay with, you know, committee meetings being in person only for that, then I think that's what we would propose, to be able to, you know, do concurrent committee meetings.
If we do have an exemption committee meeting, I would probably much rather it be online, hybrid, I guess, because we may have guests from other islands.
Yep, and that I think we can arrange for exemptions if there
Well,
are.
I'll try not to have that, but just say if it comes up, I'll know by September.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and if there are committees that want to do a hybrid, I think we just need to know ahead of time so we can place those folks in the room, but then, hopefully other committees are okay with in person only so that we can get the scheduling down. And so that we can do the concurrent meetings. Okay, so I think we're set then for that discussion item. I do want to go back to the Rules Committee update, which was the next bullet point, was, continued discussion on specific amendments that we may want to see to the HR 11-200.1, which are the EIS rules. I don't know if anybody's given thought to it.
Well, I brought this up last time. I would like to see some consideration given to supplemental EAs and a record of decision process that would formalize the mitigation measures and could be carried through in subsequent permitting processes. And contractor bid documents.
Anybody else? Thanks, Ron.
Well, while we're at it, we may need, there may be a rule fix for some of the exemption issues we're having too, but we won't know that right away.
Right, well, we'll go through that process. Hopefully the PIC can kind of tease that out. Mhm. Well, it doesn't sound like there's too much on this particular topic right now. So I guess as folks kind of keep an ear to the ground in the community or your own practices on what you think might be needed. In terms of timing, I think Ron, your topics are kind of you've suggested kind of the more substantive stuff with the rules. When, as a group, are we looking to make or propose any changes to the existing rules? And again, we're starting the process to repeal the procedural rules and get just our regular policies and procedures going.
I thought of another thing, and then I'll answer your question. There is a group of people that are interested in altering the administrative rules related to the affordable housing exemption. And I'm listening in on this group and helping them with understanding some things. So someone may come to you with a proposal, come to our committee with a proposal to do that, to alter those rules. And I can, it's no secret, but there's a group that involves some nonprofit housing developers who focus exclusively on very low income affordable rentals. And they're partnering with, they're discussing with the Sierra Club because those are the two of the main groups that had interest in it last time. And looking at some alteration of language that perhaps both parties could support. And so that we may get some kind of formal request to alter our rules. And maybe when and if those folks come forward, it would be a good time to be ready on our own to have some other items that we'd like to clean up too, or think about cleaning up. So I don't have a time for you, but I think it could be within the next couple months. And I realize it may conflict with the repeal of our rules. I think there's some urgency perceived on the part of the affordable housing rental people that, they're leaving a lot of federal money and state money on the table because of the restrictiveness of our rules. And they'd like to have us take a look at that.
Go ahead, Robin.
In looking back at the strategic planning forum, one of the other issues that came up was, and I don't remember the specifics, but I just wanted to raise it, maybe Ron will remember, was addressing some of the definitions. Does that ring any bells, Ron? We were talking about that.
Yeah, it does, but I don't remember who brought that up. For some reason, I'm thinking of Maka'ala, but I don't know. Does anybody else remember that?
It showed up when I put the potential priorities for the next 12 months. And that was one of the ones that came up. And it includes the change of definitions. You also talked about supplemental EAs and the record of decision, but also the word definitions came in. Anyway, what it's worth.
Maybe it'll come up in further discussion. Somebody's memory will be jogged. Go ahead, Michelle.
I remember, Ron, one time when the rules were rolling out and Scott had a informal meeting at your house, and we had discussed like 508 compliance in the rules. I know that didn't end up in their 508 or ADA compliance, and I wasn't part of the council at that time. Just as a practitioner in NEPA, we have to, when we post the documents for public review, they have to be compliant, ADA compliant. And I don't know if that's something that we should consider.
I think that's a requirement under Chapter 92, and Delaney, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. That we have to, it has to be, OCR'd so that it can be searchable. Maybe Les knows the answer to this. I don't recall if there's our law that, I know we've had people request and said, okay, if you don't OCR the document, my technology can't read it to me, right? So I know we do have requirements for actually making the PDF searchable.
Yeah, we make it text searchable.
Text searchable, okay.
And I know with NEPA, a lot of the federal agencies I've worked with, we have to go through and create like text boxes to describe figures, because figure isn't OCR readable. You have to create a sort of hidden text box. So when the reader program hits a figure or hits a table, the information is read in a way that the information can be transmitted.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, Delaney, or maybe you can pass that on as a homework assignment for Jody. I don't know how much longer you'll be with us, but that'd be a good question to see if that's something that's currently required. And I don't think that's something that, well, it's not something we have in the Chapter 343 rules, I don't think. But
Yeah, I think we've just been doing it as a courtesy, not a requirement. But I will inform Jody.
Thank you.
I did think of another definitional issue that perhaps came up, but that decision that was, of course, we know the decision about what an action is that happened with the Hawaii Supreme Court related to 343 and all that. I don't know if that action needs to be clarified in the rules or the statute. You know what I'm talking about, Onauna? You can make more sense of it.
About Umberger?
Yeah, Umberger.
Need to be further clarified, because I know we added language to clarify the definition.
Were we able to do that in our rules?
We did. So we addressed definitions of project and program, because I think part of the problem with the Hawaii Supreme Court definition was that it included, I think, I don't know, one of the definitions included the other term, right, that hadn't been defined yet. So the current definitions were meant to address that very issue, because the court kind of went on its own. Although I will say there have been recent decisions of other agencies that still refer to the old Umberger case and not to the new definition. So I think some folks aren't keyed into that. But Ron, if you think it needs a second look, we can always take a second look at it.
Sure, as long as we're at it.
Yeah, I was just looking up in the statute. I'm trying to see, because I know chapter 91 does allow, since you brought up the potential petition from the affordable housing folks, you know, it allows any interested person to petition an agency with rulemaking, but I was trying to see if there's a deadline to respond to the petition. I don't see one right now, but that might be something we look into. And actually, I think the last rulemaking effort was in response to a petition for rulemaking. All right, anything else on this? Well, I guess keep thinking, folks, and we'll, you know, we're trying to think of a deadline of when we'd get this started. I know it's a lot to do, but I think this is something in the back of our minds that we just start thinking about what topics we want to tackle. Talk to your respective, you know, constituency, so to speak, see what are kind of the issues, and then we can come together. I know, Ron, you have your list. Michelle, you brought up some stuff. Others have also brought up stuff, and we'll keep working to that. For what's workable right now, I think for us to work on getting the current procedural rules repealed, we'll go ahead and we have an actual timeline that we're working on for that, as well as getting the new policies and procedures drafted. As we get a better hold on what topics we want to address in terms of updating the HAR 11-200.1 for the EIS rules, we can further whittle down a timeline, you know, or to the extent a petition comes before us that needs to be addressed. That sound okay? I feel like we're getting late in the meeting and I'm losing people's focus, so I want to move on, to be honest. Okay. All right. So thank you, Mahina, for the Rules Committee update. And again, for the folks working on sections, and even if you weren't specifically assigned a section, but you have a suggestion on particular policies and procedures that you want to be seen in the document, you know, shoot your draft language to me and we can include that. Robin, I did add an update for legislative committee. I know you folks didn't meet, but I don't know if you had anything to update us.
Just very quick. There's just 3 bills. Just to remind you, we've talked a little bit about this, so I'll be very quick. HB 1803 was the constitutional amendment that died, didn't go anywhere. House Bill 1810 was passed and signed by the governor. That's the one that that changes the definition of quorum for the Environmental Advisory Council. And it is now, quorum is based on the number of actual appointees rather than the number that we're allowed to have. So that's a significant change. Thank you, Representative Lowen. Thank you, Nana. 4 new council members were formally approved, and I think that process has moved along really well. And then last piece was that the Department of Environment did not advance, as Michelle had talked, as Mary Alice had referenced earlier, and Mary, I think. So any questions about that? We'll start thinking about what's next for next year when I do the procedures and checklist.
Thanks, Robin, for tracking.
I think we end up in a really good space with Senator Gabbard and Rep. Lowen. They were very helpful to us. So that's it.
All right. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for your help this legislative session. We had a lot going on, so it seems like we're following more things each year. Okay, so next up on the agenda was discussion of potential content for our 2022 annual report. I did want to just get this on folks' radar. I know it's July, but I think the end of the year is going to come at us fairly quickly. And last year with the transition, you know, we did throw something really quick together. Again, we just summarized kind of our year in review of what happened. I will ask, you know, again, the annual reports committee. So I think I just have Tessie and Roy on here. If you guys can kind of maybe start thinking about how we want to do the annual report this year, take a look at what we did last year. And again, it was very simple. I think it was, you know, a few pages that was an insert into OPSD's annual report. And I'll, you know, hopefully Steph will be able to join the next meeting and start calling the annual report committee for meetings so that we can get this going and it's not too much of a mad dash. But otherwise, are there any, yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, sorry. I would suggest we consider, Tessie and whoever else is on that committee, that we consider talking about the strategic planning forum. It's already written up. We can make it a little bit sexier, if you will, for an annual report. But it's somewhat of a I think, a good step for this council, and it might be worth talking a little bit about what the priorities will be going forward and how it's just kind of an integrated process with INO and rules working together. It's a good story so far, and we haven't fallen flat on our face yet. So I think in terms of planning. So I think that might be an interesting component to the annual report.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, that should definitely be included in there as a summary or highlight. Any thoughts from anybody else? Okay, I think we can, in addition to that, talk about, legislation this year that was followed and all of that. Apologies, I'm trying to take notes on this, but my computer just decided to do really crazy formatting between my bullet points. All right, so legislation, strategic planning efforts. And then, hopefully we'll have more to report in terms of the repeal of our rules and perhaps restarting, another rulemaking effort by that time. Well, if you folks think of anything, please bring it up to the next meeting. Okay, lastly on the agenda, review of the standing committee assignments. So Michelle, you'll see that you got assigned to a committee where you were not present, I think. So hopefully that was okay. Thank you for participating. If there's anybody else who, wants to be, if you folks want to have movement, of course, let us know. I think typically we have most people serving on 2 committees, but Michelle, we had only put you on 1 since you weren't here. If there's another committee you would like to join, let us know. I think annual report could certainly use help. They only have 3 members right now. Not much to do with Ledge right now, but that committee is very active during the legislative session. And anybody else, if there's any errors in what I did, let me know. Hopefully not everybody has that list. Again, the committee meeting times are kind of the standard times that we have been using. And they are specific to where we don't have any committees overlapping. Although I did put annual report and strategic planning in the same box just because we don't have that many annual report meetings. And I don't think likewise strategic planning needs to meet all the time. Maybe for a period going forward, strategic planning will have to. You folks will notice even today we moved strategic planning to a different time period, to the legislative time slot, because there was no legislative committee. So to the extent another committee is not meeting and your committee wants to meet, at a later time or a different time, we can make those adjustments just depending on who's meeting when. Again, as we talked about earlier, if we are meeting in person, we do have the flexibility to stack committee meetings at the same time. So again, those can be moved, later in the morning. But that's kind of where we are right now. These, again, the general guidelines for when we're meeting, what times we're meeting. So any questions or comments on that? Everybody's pretty comfortable with it. Okay. Sounds good. So again, our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, August 2nd for everybody working on drop-ins for the new procedures document. The agenda deadline will be Tuesday, July 20. Well, if you can get it by Tuesday, July 26th, because we need to post the agenda on the 27th. So if you can get your drop-ins done by then. Any questions, comments, announcements before we wrap up today? No? All right, well, thank you everybody again for a good meeting. Looking forward to seeing you folks next month. And if there's any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out. All right, and thanks Les for getting everything organized.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Great
Bye-bye.
job.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
2:15, we're adjourning. Okay, bye.
Sure.
Here, guys.